Hi there, I'm Clifford Bates, and welcome once again to Reading Aristotle's Politics. Today we're looking at chapter 12 of book 1. And this chapter 12 is interesting because he returns to the household and the parts of the household. We went for a long talk on first on slavery, and where there was extensive discussion about slavery, and then there was a kind of then a big discussion about acquisition, about and what's tied to acquisition and getting things, and the distinction between the necessary goods and useful goods, and then a discussion about the forms of acquisition, both natural and unnatural. Then the question of the trade as an intermediary, it's unnatural, but sometimes it fulfills something that's natural. And then we had a whole discussion about even interest in and then monopoly making, which seems to undercut the discussion of the criticism that money making from money, and the criticism of money making of unnatural acquisition is or interest making is kind of a problematic thing. Um, Chapter 12 is returning back to the thing. So let's go to start. Since there are three parts of the art of household management: mastery, which we've spoken of earlier, paternal rule, and maternal and marital rule. And the latter two must now be taken up. Now, what's interesting is it was in the original discussion in book 3. It was master slave, husband wife, parent child. Right now, he kind of flips it. He says, "I don't have to talk about this, but I flipped the two." He now flips it. He says paternal rule, parent child, and maternal rule. Now he's going to talk about this. These differ fundamentally from the former, which we ought to see. Now this is 57. This is there's going to make a lacuna here for the point of text. I've supplied what I take to be the sense of what's being done. In other words, there is something wrong with the text here in that sense. Something's cut out, fill out, and this is where the lacuna is right here. This right here. That these latter two, these things. He goes, the latter two must be taken up. These fundamentally differ from the former, which, since one sought to rule a wife and a child as free persons, though it is not in the same manner of rule in each case. Okay, where the wife is being ruled in political fashion and the children in a kingly fashion. Okay, so therefore this is very interesting. That political here, there is the difference between political rule and kingly rule is kind of giving it a metaphor, and that is that political rule is a kind of husband and wife is a form of, the man rules the wife in the political fashion, but a parent rules the child as a kingly fashion, right? This is very interesting here in this sense. Uh, this is this all forces us to understand what he means by marital rule, relationship between man and woman. That it's not really to be, and it's not the same as slave mastery. In other words, that the wife and children are free people, are not unfree. So therefore, the rule of wife and children as free persons, not as masters. So therefore, this is why it's different from slavery mastery. In other words, that it must be different from mastery, the former mastery, because children are free people, right? They're going to be free people. The wife is a free person. There's a distinction between wife and slave, right? This is a very important understanding, and therefore the child. This is why despotic character, the despot, the master of slaves, and the paternalism are not the same thing. This is why, this is a critique. The feminist position, a radical feminist, made the argument that patriarchy or paternalism is despotism. And the argument here tends to be that no, it's not. Paternalism is not. Aristotle would argue that paternalism, or the rule of patriarchy, the rule of the patriarchs, is not a form of mastery. Why? in the sense that because it is not, in other words, these people, it's not a rule, it's not the rule over slaves, it's not the rule over the unfree, it's the rule over those like yourself, okay, who are just meet, who are what, who are not yet fully developed, who need care, okay, in that fundamental sense. So let's continue here. So therefore, he says that the rule of the wife is political in character, and the rule over children is kingly fashion. Right? For the male, unless constituted in some respect contrary by nature to nature, is by nature more expert at leading than the female. So therefore, there is the argument here is that for some reason that he's better at leading. Men are for some reason nature, as long as he's not defective in his nature. In other words, as long the typical male is going to have something that he's going to be taking the lead more than the woman, right? And more expert at leading, taking the lead in that sense. And the elder and the complete than the younger and the incomplete. So the male has something in its nature that it makes it kind of what he says, uh, um, unless contrary to his nature, the male, right, is by nature more expert at leading, taking rule, or taking charge, right? The argument goes. And the same is true with the elder and the elder and the complete, than the younger and the incompletes, right? He says, in most political offices, it's true that there is an alteration of ruler and rule. So ruler, in other words, political rule is not, it's alteration of rule between the ruler and the rule alters, right? This idea. Since they tend by their nature to be on equal footing and to differ in nothing, all the same, while the one rules and the other's ruled. The ruler seeks to establish differences in external appearances, forms of address and prerogatives, as the story of Artemis and his footpan. In other words, therefore, this is the idea. This is Artemis, the Egyptian king of lowly origin, had his subjects worship a statue of a god fashioned from the golden footpan. Right, this is Herodotus' thing. Why is that important? This is the idea that even rulers want to do what they establish themselves differences in external appearances, but political rule, there's reality that there's ruler, and because of equality, some rulers want to impose a difference that's not there. In other words, the argument goes here political. There's an alteration of ruler. If there is an political office normally has that there's the ruler and rule changes. Right. This is political character. Um, and what happens here is the ruler seeks to establish his external differences between them. I'm in charge, you're not. So therefore, forms of address, and prerogatives, the rights that it can do. And that's why the story Aristotle uses the well-known story of Artemis in his pan, that the pan that he created a pan and made it a god, so that his certain people would worship it. But again, this is a king. This is not a normal political ruler in this sense. Um, but the rule over the children is kingly. Oh no, sorry, stop. The male always stands thus in relationship to the female. So therefore, and the question is the man's standing of relationship why is this? Is it something strictly in nature, or is it this that what some have given what was created as at once a kind of a leadingness, then it becomes permanent in the sense that they create external appearances, to create prerogatives, the forms of address, prerogatives, and conventional things that lead this to be. Now, Aristotle's vague here. Aristotle offers both. You can read both here. Aristotle does not simply say men are naturally superior. Is that men just tend to have are more, as long as they're not defective, the average man is going to have something more driving them to lead than the average woman in a sense. In that sense, as long as they're both, not defective in some way or something like this, that the man is simply just going to be have the more inclination more to lead, and therefore, and that's like the male tends to lead. The You could say even dominate, right? That's the question is that is it tied to testosterone and aggression or what? What we don't know. This is a big question here. This is that famous discussion by that famous thing on aggression. I forget that German author. It's a famous. Oh come on, I'm slipping my mind. It's a very famous anthropology science book about the question of where does it tie in animals and things and human beings as well. Um, Lawrence, I think his name is. I think maybe hold on. Let me just. Yeah, I was right. Conrad Lawrence. Lawrence's idea that this is how that guy's bad translations. People argue, but this idea that we have certain elements doesn't mean that men are superior to women. Is that these the differences that we have differences that each of us have certain inclinations, certain things, and that therefore that it's not that men are lead because they are superior, but rather they're just more inclined to, and that women they have other things they are concerned more with other things, and therefore this is why it leads this way. And that's why the male tends to always stand in relation to female. But the rule over the children is kingly. For but no, let's stop here for a second. Remember that also the rule over the woman is political in that sense. There is an equality of it, but it's an equality that does not change whose ruling is changing. Rather, it's and he gives that discussion of the discussion of the story of Artemis and his pan, and why certain rulers will want to certain rulers for some reason it's not changing for some reason that the ruler and ruled isn't changing here, and that and this is now the argument here is that nature, the inclination of man being that way of seeking to dominate or aggression, and women lacking that, having less of that. This is why this happens, right? So therefore, something by nature, then what happens is that it's not. It doesn't deny their inequality. Doesn't lead them to saying they're no longer equal. They need each other, but they are man and female complete each other in this fundamental sense. So therefore, this is not a kind of domination for the exploitation of, but rather it's simply just that that one has a tendency towards it, and it's maybe just put up with it as long as it's not destructive, right? The argument goes right, but it does not justify it in that sense. It does not say that this person ought to control this. No, they're equal in that fundamental sense. Whereas the paternal thing is that they're superior, their age and their completeness, and the child's incompleteness and his youth puts them in a condition where here this one has authority over this one, and that therefore this is done again for that. Therefore, the rule over the children is kingly. For the begetter is ruler on the basis both of affection and age. There's affection, which is a very mark of kingly rule. So kingly rule is about this idea of affection, love, care. Right? Homer thus spoke finely of Zeus when he addressed as father of men and gods, the king of them all. For by nature the king should be different, but he should be of the same stock. And this is the case of the elder in relation to the younger, and the begetter to the child. So therefore, they're the same stock. They're better. They're more complete. They should be different, but but they have the same. They are same stock in that sense. And this ends the discussion of parent, child, husband, wife. Instead of having a discussion of this is where you could have an argument for a separate chapter on both in that sense. You could have a separate chapter. Why didn't you have a separate chapter on husband and wife? Going more into discussion of the wife, the marital relationship. What about this? Um, the question is that maybe this is not Aristotle didn't find the need to talk about this at this moment. It's not that it's maybe in this particular setting, such setting that he has other fishes to fry. In other words, his argument here is that this is a part of the household, and that the household isn't really going to be a sufficient mechanism to understand the city. That it's you can't understand. In other words, you simply can't understand the whole in light of the part. By studying the part does not teach you about the whole. Okay, and therefore, since the polis is an aggregate of households, uh, understanding the household won't necessarily give you a move to understand the city and the thing the city does is that is politics. And he gave a hint that it's a study of equals with the of wife. Wife is political rule in that sense. That's why this chapter is a very interesting chapter. It's short, but it's pregnant, very pregnant, with things that grabs your interest and arguments that you could develop. No, this is the thing. The politics doesn't give you everything. It actually opens up. What it does often is asks. It gives a framework that, and he raises very important themes that then often will raise other questions. And sometimes the questions are raised in the text. It says, I can't talk about it, like the discussion of money making and monopolizing and capital things that you can derive from it. But here, the question of the parent child, husband wife relationship, which could go into a much more detail than he does. And this is because he wants to shift to what is the political, right? This is the whole point. And so let's end here and to turn to chapter 12 next and our next meeting. If you have any comments or questions, please put them below. If I see them, I will reply to you. If you liked it, like it. If you didn't like it, don't say, but say why. Criticisms, I expect criticism. Share if you liked it, share it with a friend. Share the whole series with someone that might be useful in that sense. Like and dislike, that's always fun too. Um, then you can also do another thing. You can uh, uh, um, follow me on social media. That's there. You can subscribe and get up. If you want to get more updates of this and other series, subscribe and you'll get notifications on things. You can follow me on social media where I post things and things like that. If you want to help contribute, you can contribute through subscribe to our Patreon. I don't really do much on these things. That's because I don't really do much. I should do more, but I don't. So I'm sorry, I apologize on that. But there's only one person, one or two people, I think, and they haven't demanded much from me yet. Or if you want to help, you can always buy um, uh, the notebook. This is something I recently did this summer. It's a study guide. It's really a guide to help you understand the politics. It's not summaries. It's the notebook on Aristotle's politics. It is a kind of a study notebook and guide of the politics, chapter book by book, chapter by chapter, with charts and things like this, and places after every book of the politics. There's a place where you can take notes. Like I always have a blank page between books that you can take notes on it. Some people say, "Why did you do that for?" It's kind of I envisioned it to be a student thing. I did it through Lulu because the big publishers wanted us to do $100, $200 for a student textbook. I had two or three publishers interested in this, and I thought it was just too unreasonable. I was trying to get it under 20, but inflation, so it's like under 30 still. So I make some money. So if you buy it from Lulu, I make more money than I would do if you buy it by Amazon or that. So just all right. This is like I said. This is like Cliff Notes in Aristotle's Politics. It's not to be read and substitute of the text. It's a guide to read the text. So if you have any, like I said, that's it for the day. We'll turn to chapter 12 next. Take care and bye bye.